Welcome to the Rugby Obsession Deep Dive. Right off the bat, if you want to stay completely up to date with all the latest rugby insights, make sure you hit that subscribe button for Rugby Obsession.
Yeah, it is absolutely the best way to ensure these deep dives come straight to you.
It really is. So we have a really fascinating situation to look at today. The Springboks just officially concluded their very first national alignment camp of the 2026 season.
Right, and if you follow the sport closely, you already know the start of a new season brings, a palpable wave of fresh energy.
Oh, for sure. But our sources highlight that this specific alignment camp, it was heavily focused on really detailed boardroom sessions.
Yeah, we're talking about deep strategic meetings, outlining coaching expectations, and, dissecting key areas of the game for the coming year.
Exactly. And the roster for this particular camp tells a huge story about where the team is heading. There has been a tremendous amount of public buzz about the 11 uncapped players.
11 fresh faces sitting in those boardroom chairs absorbing the Springbok culture.
Right. But the strategic masterpiece we need to examine today, it actually lies in who isn't sitting in those chairs.
Because 5 senior players were omitted from this camp.
And 4 of those are locally based household names.
Which is an incredibly intentional move by Springbok coach Rassie Erasmus.
Yeah. So what does this omission really mean for their careers and the future of the Springboks?
Yeah.
Because that is the mission of our deep dive today.
Exactly. We are going to unpack Erasmus's highly calculated methods.
So I do want to set a really celebratory tone right away here, because we're talking about players with genuinely illustrious careers.
Absolutely legendary status.
Right. And we're also looking at a brilliantly pragmatic, forward-thinking coaching style. So who are the specific locally based players left off the list?
We are looking at hooker Bongi Mbonambi, Vincent Koch, Willie Roux, and Trevor Nycame.
Names that are basically synonymous with the backbone of the Springboks.
Completely. They represent experience, resilience, all those monumental moments on the pitch. But the strategy Erasmus is employing here actively begins the process of phasing out Koch, Roux, and Nycame from frontline action.
When fans hear a phrase like phased out, it can sound a bit alarming. How does the timeline to the next World Cup factor into this decision?
Well, the timeline dictates this move entirely. When you project forward to the next World Cup, the probability of Koch, Roux, and Nycame being in peak physical condition for that tournament is, it's highly unlikely.
The math simply does not align with where they are in their physical careers.
Exactly. Knowing that, it makes perfect sense for Erasmus to have them begin banking less game time right now.
Which opens the door for those 11 new uncapped players.
Right. Why take up valuable minutes in those limited boardroom seats with players who won't be on the ultimate stage in a few years?
Because those rookies desperately need that boardroom time to understand the expectations.
It changes the entire dynamic of the room.
It really does. If a rookie is sitting next to a veteran who has been there for a decade, human nature suggests the rookie's going to stay quiet and defer to the senior player.
Taking those veterans out of the equation forces the uncapped players to speak up, to engage, and truly learn the playbook.
So where does Bongi Mbonambi fit into this? He was also omitted, but is his situation identical to the other 3?
Mbonambi is an interesting outlier in this specific group. He is 35 years old now.
And for a front rower, looking down the barrel of another World Cup cycle, the physical demands are monumental.
They are. However, based on the insights from our sources, he is the one player among these omitted veterans who might still have a glimmer of hope to book a ticket to that next World Cup.
A 35-year-old hooker still in the conversation for a World Cup spot. That speaks volumes about his durability.
But having a glimmer of hope is very different from being the first name on the team sheet. It's no longer a guarantee.
Which is a profound shift in status. His omission from this alignment camp reflects that evolving role.
He isn't being discarded from the system, but his grip on the starting jersey is firmly on the bubble.
Watching a player of his caliber navigate this kind of transition is fascinating, and makes you wonder how fans process these changing of the guards.
It's a great time to bring them into the conversation.
Before we get into the highly unconventional way Erasmus is actually communicating with these omitted veterans, I want to remind you once more to make sure you subscribe to Rugby Obsession. It helps us keep bringing you these deep dives.
And we really want to know your thoughts on this dynamic.
Yes. How do you feel about phasing out beloved veterans to build for the future? Let us know what you think. Drop a comment and share your perspective.
Because managing the downshifting of a prominent player is traditionally one of the most volatile tasks a coach faces.
Oh, it frequently causes friction within the squad.
But Erasmus seems to bypass that friction with a heavy dose of pragmatism.
Let's look at the actual communication strategy here. Erasmus gave a quote to the publication Rapport that sheds a lot of light on his methodology.
He made it clear that being left out of the alignment camp does not mean their careers are over. They can still play test rugby this year.
But his reasoning for keeping them away from the boardroom is incredibly blunt. He basically asked why he should invite someone to an alignment camp where they just have to listen again to how and why the team does things.
It is a masterclass in resource allocation. These veterans have been in his system for years.
They haven't just heard the foundational philosophies. They helped build them.
Exactly. Forcing them to sit in a conference room and listen to baseline expectations all over again would be a profound waste of their time.
And the coaching staff's energy, too. He even took it a step further when describing how he updates them on new tactics. He noted there might just be 4 or 5 changes that he can simply send them on WhatsApp.
That quote is just brilliant pragmatism.
It really is. It is such a stark contrast to the traditional idea of highly formalized sports management. You have elite international rugby strategies being distributed via a WhatsApp message.
But consider the underlying team dynamics required to make that work. You can only manage elite athletes via WhatsApp if the foundation of mutual respect is rock solid.
It highlights a deep trust and understanding he already shares with his veteran players.
He knows what his veterans need, and he knows what they don't need. They do not need elementary alignment.
Right. If there are 4 or 5 tactical tweaks to the playbook, a text message suffices.
That deep understanding allows Erasmus to direct all of his high-level coaching bandwidth during the camp toward those 11 uncapped players.
The ones who actually require that intense face-to-face instruction. When you frame it that way, the omission almost feels like a graduation.
It means the coach trusts your rugby IQ implicitly. You have moved past the boardroom phase of your career.
But while the WhatsApp communication is highly pragmatic, there is a much heavier, more emotional side to phasing out veterans that we need to explore here.
The human element is always present in sports, especially regarding the desire for a proper goodbye.
Yeah, the concept of the farewell match is deeply embedded in sports mythology.
Fans and players alike romanticize the idea of a legendary athlete announcing their retirement and going on a final tour.
Playing one last match in front of a roaring home crowd and riding off into the sunset on their own terms.
It is a beautiful narrative, but Erasmus is deeply candid about the harsh reality of that expectation.
Because he actually pulls from his own personal experience to shape his coaching philosophy here.
Erasmus's own playing days provide the blueprint. He pointed out to Rapport that some players desperately want that farewell match, but he never got one.
No, he had a formidable playing career, earning 36 tests for the Springboks between 1997 and 2001.
But his time on the pitch came to a very abrupt halt. There was no grand finale.
There was no ceremonious last match. How does that personal history of an abrupt ending influence the way he manages a locker room today?
Well, especially when the current players are acutely aware of how fragile a career can be.
Which brings us to Stephen Kitchoff. Our sources mention him in this context.
Kitchoff is the perfect modern parallel. He is a celebrated player who was recently forced to retire from the game entirely due to a severe neck injury.
There was no warning and certainly no farewell tour. A neck injury is a stark, terrifying reminder of the sport's uncompromising brutality.
The reality of professional sports is that bodies give out, or the team's tactical timeline simply moves past you.
And Erasmus uses this reality as a psychological tool rather than shying away from it.
He embraces the fact that things don't always end perfectly.
Instead of trying to manufacture a fairy tale ending for his aging players, he uses the lack of closure to generate a specific emotional response.
He noted that when players realize their career might just end without a parade, they often make a very distinct psychological pivot.
They decide, in Erasmus's own words, "I'll show you. It's not going to end like that for me."
That phrase is incredibly potent, "I'll show you."
Erasmus explicitly stated that is what we want. He is actively cultivating that raw defiance.
Think about it. If a coach gives a veteran a comfortable, guaranteed farewell tour, what happens to their competitive edge?
The edge dulls. If a player knows they have a guaranteed spot for their final season, they might subconsciously check out.
They soak in the applause rather than fighting for every inch on the pitch. By putting Mbonambi, Koch, Roux, and Nyakan on the bubble, Erasmus strips away that comfort.
He tells them they're being phased out, and they might not get that perfect goodbye.
It is a calculated provocation designed to ignite a massive competitive fire.
He is daring them to force his hand.
He wants them to make him pick them, not out of nostalgia or sentimentality.
But because they have proven they're undeniably the best option available,
It completely shifts the dynamic from a passive conclusion of a long career to an active, fiery battle for professional survival.
it changes the entire paradigm of how we view aging athletes in high-performance environments. The goal isn't to gently manage their decline.
The goal is to challenge their pride. The lack of a ceremonious transition acts as a catalyst. And it is impossible not to see how this translates far beyond the rugby pitch.
Exactly. Bringing this back to you listening right now. Think about how you handle transitions in your own life or career.
So often we wait for the perfect moment of closure.
We want the neat bow on the end of a major project, a business partnership, or a job. But life frequently changes the lineup abruptly,
And you might find yourself left out of the metaphorical alignment camp.
which can be incredibly jarring in the moment. But as we see with the Springboks veteran management, the absence of that perfect, comfortable transition might be exactly what provides the grit needed to push forward.
It replaces complacency with resilience. The imperfection of the situation becomes the fuel for the next chapter.
The imperfection becomes the fuel. That is a brilliant way to synthesize what initially appeared to be just a simple roster update.
We started by looking at a list of players missing from a boardroom, and we ended up dissecting the psychology of human motivation and defiance.
Studying these elite environments always leads back to fundamental human nature.
It brings up a final thought I want to leave you with today.
Go for it.
We discussed the romance of the farewell match and the cold reality of the abrupt end. But consider this. If denying a player a comfortable farewell tour actually sparks that ultimate I'll show you mentality and keep their competitive fire burning until the very last second, is the lack of closure actually the greatest gift a coach can give a veteran athlete?
That is a fantastic question to mull over. Is denying the closure the ultimate sign of respect for a competitor? We will leave you to think about that one.
It's definitely something to chew on.
And as you are pondering the psychology of elite coaching, please take one more moment to subscribe to Rugby Obsession. We want you with us for every single deep dive as we continue to explore the incredible strategies shaping the game. Thank you for listening to the Rugby Obsession Deep Dive, and we'll look forward to you listening to our next episode.